Every great movie starts with an idea, but for that idea to truly come alive on screen, the team of writers and the director have to build a solid foundation, one that can hold the entire story together. James Cameron's Avatar is one of the best examples of how that's done. Just think about it, over 90% of the developed story never made it into the final film, and yet it became a masterpiece. Cameron didn't just make a movie, he created an entire universe. After Avatar premiered, we got books, comics, and video games, and these weren't just fan-made additions. They're all official parts of the story Cameron had been developing for years. The Avatar timeline is so rich and multi-layered that you could make dozens of prequels from it, and every single one would be unique and meaningful. My name is Evgeny, and today I'll take you through the complete canonical chronology of the Avatar universe. I promise this is going to be interesting. Let's begin. In truth, the conflict between the Na'vi and humans began long before the events of the first film. The year is 2039. Earth is going through one of the worst periods in its history. Humanity has nearly exhausted most of its natural resources. Due to massive deforestation, pollution, deep mining, and countless other consequences of human activity, the planet stands on the brink of collapse. But the main problem isn't just ecological, it's the growing lack of resources that keeps fueling endless wars between nations. The heads of the world's most powerful mining and transport corporations soon realized that Earth could no longer meet the needs of an ever-expanding population. To survive, humanity had to look beyond, into space. They decided to join forces and create one massive organization dedicated to resource development and expansion. We know it as the RDA, the Resources Development Administration. The moon became humanity's first off-world target. Surprisingly, even without an atmosphere, the company managed to establish large-scale mining operations there. It was one small step for man and a massive leap for the RDA. By 2045, the corporation had successfully colonized Mars and soon after began resource extraction on other planets within the solar system. But the true turning point came 5 years later. While studying the Alpha Centauri star system, astronomers made a groundbreaking discovery. Orbiting a massive gas giant called Polyphemus, they found a moon. Initial analysis revealed something incredible: the presence of life, liquid water, and a functioning ecosystem. Alpha Centauri was one of the closest star systems to Earth, and by that time, human technology had already advanced enough to make a long interstellar journey possible. Scientists immediately began preparing for humanity's first expedition beyond the solar system. The year is 2065. The first automated probes were launched to explore the newly discovered moon. They confirmed what scientists had hoped for. Pandora was teeming with life, rich in biodiversity, and contained rare natural resources. Early scans also revealed something extraordinary: traces of a superconductive material that could potentially solve Earth's ongoing energy crisis. You see, scientists had long faced a problem. Despite all the advances in semiconductor technology, they could never achieve stable superconductivity. One critical element was missing: something that could stabilize the reaction and prevent the material from collapsing on itself. That's when they coined the term unobtainium, meaning something that simply couldn't be obtained or recreated in a lab. In 2077, a second expedition was sent to Pandora, this time equipped with advanced scanning systems capable of deeper surface analysis. Once again, they detected deposits of an unknown mineral. Preliminary data suggested it was indeed a high-temperature superconductor, the kind of material humanity had only dreamed of. The impossible was finally within reach. 9 years later, the first manned expedition reached the Alpha Centauri system. From orbit, humans began studying Pandora and sending remotely operated rovers to explore its surface. The mission's goals were clear: analyze the moon's life forms, study its flora, and collect ore samples. The first fragment of unobtainium proved beyond doubt. The material possessed an exceptionally powerful magnetic field, unlike the fragile, unstable crystals humans had synthesized on Earth. Pandora's unobtainium was a stable quasi-crystal. capable of repelling or attracting magnetic fields with immense force. For energy generators based on matter-antimatter reactions, this discovery was nothing short of revolutionary. At last, humanity had found a way to solve its problems, and maybe even heal the Earth. But there was one major obstacle. Interstellar missions weren't cheap. They required enormous amounts of money and resources, things only one organization truly had, the RDA. By 2011, when humans began establishing their first outposts and living modules on Pandora, all missions were no longer led by scientists, but by the Resources Development Administration. The company signed agreements promising to provide scientists with funding and access to research programs, including, of course, the Avatar program itself. In return, RDA would extract unobtainium, a resource valuable enough to cover all expenses and bring in unimaginable profits back on Earth. But things didn't go smoothly. Pandora might look like Earth, lush forests, blue skies, familiar landscapes, yet it was far from hospitable. Gravity there was about 20% weaker, while the atmosphere was 20% denser, and the high concentration of carbon dioxide made the air completely unbreathable for humans. There was oxygen, plenty of it, but it was mixed with gases like hydrogen sulfide, methane, and xenon. That's why every human on Pandora had to wear a filtration mask just to survive. The second major challenge came from Pandora's flora and fauna. Beyond the deadly zoo plant life, capable of killing even a grown human, there existed something far more extraordinary, an intelligent humanoid species known as the Na'vi. The Na'vi were divided into many clans and tribes. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, they possessed advanced intelligence and were more than capable of defending their lands when threatened. To make matters worse, no one knew their true numbers. Early estimates suggested there could be more than 1 million of them, while the human presence on Pandora was extremely limited. Even with humanity's superior military technology, the risks of open conflict were simply too high, so the RDA decided to take a different path: diplomacy. And at first, it worked. For the first 10 years of human presence on Pandora, small-scale unobtainium mining didn't lead to direct clashes with the Na'vi. These beings had no history of war and were not hostile by nature. That's when the first schools were built, an attempt to bridge two civilizations. The RDA launched a special initiative called TAP, the Teaching Avatar Program, or simply the Ambassador Program. Its goal was to raise young Na'vi in a human cultural environment, so they could act as mediators between RDA representatives and the various Na'vi clans, helping resolve conflicts and share human knowledge and technology. TAP became the first real step toward connecting the two species. Humans tried to win the Na'vi over by offering knowledge, medicine, communication, and the benefits of human civilization. But the Na'vi lived by their own laws, and they never needed humanity's gifts. Deep down, the Na'vi already knew what humans truly wanted, and with time, their fears were confirmed. In 2013-50, the RDA began constructing its first city on Pandora, Hell's Gate. By then, the company had gathered enough resources to begin large-scale unobtainium extraction. Bulldozers carved their way through the alien wilderness, and the scars on Pandora's surface began to grow. But it wasn't just humanity's arrogance or its interference with Pandora's fragile ecosystem that sparked the first real conflict between the Na'vi and humans. By this point, human civilization had fully mastered genetic engineering. Scientists had learned how to clone and decode DNA sequences. Yet the most groundbreaking and controversial discovery came from a geneticist named Cordell Lovecraft. He developed a device capable of establishing a mental link between humans and other intelligent species, even primates. For the process to work, the connection had to be completely stable. Even across great distances, Lovecraft soon realized something remarkable. His device functioned perfectly between identical twins. The receiving body needed to share the same genetic code as the sender, so he decided to modify primate DNA by adding human genetic material. In other words, a person couldn't control another body unless it contained part of their own genome, their biological signature. Otherwise, the brain rejected the signal, At first glance, this breakthrough didn't seem to have any practical value for society, but the RDA quickly saw its potential. Working alongside scientists, they used both human and Na'vi DNA to create something entirely new: a hybrid. The first prototypes were far from perfect. The Na'vi brain was much more complex than the human one. It consisted of 3 segments instead of 2. That third segment served a special purpose. It allowed the Na'vi to form a neural bond with other living beings, even plants. It was also responsible for sensing the bioenergy of the surrounding world, helping them navigate nature, feel each other's emotions, and connect with the creatures around them. But even this obstacle didn't stop human scientists. Eventually, they succeeded in creating hybrids so realistic that they were nearly indistinguishable from true Na'vi. Only a few details gave them away. For instance, 5 fingers on their hands and feet instead of 4. The neural link between human and avatar transmitted through the Na'vi brain's third segment, replicating the body's proportions, respiratory system, and tail, but not the fingers. It turned out that the human brain was more comfortable adapting to new limbs than to the absence of familiar ones, so scientists decided to leave all 5 fingers intact. The second major problem was even deeper. All life forms on Pandora, including the Na'vi, didn't actually use DNA to encode genetic information. Instead, their cells were built on peptide nucleic acids, or PNA, a more stable and durable molecular structure, better suited to Pandora's harsh environment. And this difference unlocked something extraordinary: a biological communication network powered by molecular interaction and bioelectric currents. The Na'vi call it Eywa. But scientists managed to solve that problem too. Peptide nucleic acids can interact with both DNA and RNA, making the creation of a human-Na'vi hybrid possible. Though the process took much longer than expected, the third major challenge was transportation. Fully grown avatars couldn't be shipped from Earth to Pandora using cryogenic pods designed for humans. And since the Earth-based version of the avatar was already adapted to Earth's gravity, maintaining a 3-meter-tall body in deep space would have required enormous energy and resources. So the decision was made to grow the avatars during the journey. Each embryo would develop inside a biocapsule throughout the flight to Pandora, a voyage that lasted 3 years on board the ship, or about 6 years in Earth time. That long duration allowed scientists to use gentler growth stimulants, ensuring safer and more natural development. This method fit perfectly with the Avatar program's original goal: to create a workforce of miners who wouldn't need breathing masks, whose strength and endurance far exceeded that of humans, and who could survive by eating local food without relying on constant supply shipments from Earth. But as always, there was one big issue: profit. The process was incredibly expensive and didn't cover its own costs. In the end, only a handful of scientists, those directly assigned to study Pandora, were granted the privilege of having their own avatar bodies. One of those scientists was Dr. Grace Augustine, a xenobotanist and the head of the Avatar program. Grace arrived on Pandora in 2136 and received her avatar body 3 years later. Her mission was to study Pandora's plant life, but more importantly, she founded a school where she taught young Na'vi the English language and human culture. Through her avatar, Grace managed to earn the trust of Pandora's children. Before her, humans had already tried opening schools, but none of the Na'vi ever attended them. Those earlier efforts were more about paperwork than genuine connection. Grace changed that. Over the years, she truly succeeded in building a bridge between the two worlds. At that time, the Na'vi still trusted the Sky people. No one yet knew the truth about the tragedy of the Sorrento clan or the massacre at the Song Circle. In 2013-80, something unimaginable happened. The RDA destroyed one of the most important Na'vi clans, the Sorrento. You see, in the wilds of Pandora, there's no need for technology. But with so many tribes spread across vast territories, how do they share knowledge and stay connected? The Sorrento were the storytellers of Pandora, wandering keepers of memory. They traveled from clan to clan, passing down tales, spreading news, settling disputes, and serving as neutral witnesses to history. That sacred bond of communication was first established by Entu, the very first Toruk Makto, the great leader who once united all the clans of Pandora. During a massive volcanic eruption that threatened the Tree of Souls, Entu, the first Toruk Makto, mounted the mighty Great Leonopteryx and called upon the other Na'vi for help. Together, they broke apart the surrounding cliffs, releasing a torrent of water that cooled the lava and saved the sacred tree from destruction. After this event, Entu decided to create a new clan, a nomadic tribe of Na'vi known as the Sorrento. They had no home of their own. Instead, they took an oath to dedicate their lives to diplomacy and communication between clans. Every child born into the Sorrento clan was marked beneath the eye with a small tattoo, a family symbol showing which tribe they belonged to. For nearly 2,500 years, the Sorrento carried out their sacred mission, acting as envoys, mediators, and keepers of Pandora's oral history. But everything changed with the arrival of the humans. By that time, the TAP program was supposed to have already raised the first Na'vi children in human cultural environments. However, not a single clan agreed to send their young to boarding schools, places from which they might never return. The RDA was spending enormous sums of money, yet had nothing to show for it. That's when the creators of TAP, John Mercer and Alma Cortez, decided to take a darker path. They organized the kidnapping of several young Na'vi. Their original target was the Comtier clan, but one of its members, Makasa, trying to protect his own people, revealed the location of another, the Sorrento. Once every year, the Sorrento would gather at a sacred place called the Song Circle, where they performed the ancient ritual of song, a ceremony that connected their voices to Eywa and to every living being on Pandora. The humans discovered the location of the Song Circle, and they came armed. When the Sorrento refused to hand over their children peacefully, RDA security forces, acting on Mercer's orders and against the pleas of Alma Cortez to spare the Na'vi, slaughtered every adult member of the clan and kidnapped the children. The details of the operation were hidden even from RDA's upper management. Only 3 people knew the truth: Mercer, Cortez, and the commander of the strike team, Angela Harding. To cover their tracks, they submitted falsified reports to headquarters and released a deadly toxic gas at the massacre site, ensuring that no evidence would ever be found. The gas completely dissolved the Na'vi bodies. It even ate away the bones. The entire area was meticulously wiped clean. Makasa of the Comtier clan had no idea the humans would annihilate the entire tribe. To protect himself, he blamed his spiritual leader, Anufi, a shaman who had last visited the Sorrento. She had prepared a ceremonial potion used during their sacred song rituals. Makasa told everyone that the potion was poisoned, and that all the Sorrento had died after drinking it. As a result, the Comtier clan exiled their spiritual guide, Anufi. Ironically, this tragic lie worked in the humans' favor. Even the Na'vi themselves believed that the destruction of the Sorrento clan wasn't caused by humans, but by Anufi's mistake. The kidnapped children were then raised in captivity, taught human history, economics, and technology. They endured constant physical and psychological abuse. Speaking their native tongue was strictly forbidden. No one outside the secret project ever learned about the massacre at the Song Circle. All the reports were forged. The 5 surviving children, Nor, Thailand, Ahari, Ranella, and Sorrento, were officially recorded as the first Na'vi participants of the TAPI program. On the opposite side of Pandora, in 2014-1, Dr. Grace Augustine completed the construction of her first school. Through her avatar, she managed to establish communication with the Omaticaya clan, convincing them to allow their children to study, primarily to learn the language of the Sky People. 8 students volunteered, among them Neytiri and her sister Silwanin. Grace achieved the first truly peaceful contact between humans and the Omaticaya, and her success soon drew the attention of Parker Selfridge, a young and ambitious administrator within the RDA. Selfridge believed in the potential of the Avatar program. He hoped it could help resolve the growing tensions between humans and the Na'vi. At his request, Grace was permitted to bring the Na'vi children to Hell's Gate, allowing them to witness the full extent of humanity's technology. The power of bulldozers, the scale of industrial machinery, and even the might of human military equipment. The Omaticaya leaders were not exactly pleased that their children were spending time at the human school, playing strange sky people games, but the clan's Tsahik, Moat, believed differently. She thought the Na'vi had a duty to teach humans to follow the laws of Eywa. In her eyes, it was the sky people, not the Na'vi, who were in need of guidance. Moat saw the kindness in Grace's heart, and a bond of trust slowly grew between them. But nothing lasts forever. A year later, two of the children, Natap and Anuk, returned from the human base feeling unwell. Their condition worsened rapidly. Within hours, they could no longer walk, speak, or even feed themselves. The Omaticaya leader, Eitu Khan, blamed the sky people. He claimed that the children had been poisoned during their visit to the human facility. When Grace heard the news, she realized that her entire program was on the verge of collapse. If she couldn't save her students, the Na'vi would never again allow their children near a human school. Before long, all 8 of the children had fallen ill. The last to be infected was Natir. No herbal remedy or native potion helped. It became clear they hadn't been poisoned by Pandora's plants. There could be only one explanation. Humans were responsible. At Hell's Gate, Grace noticed strange spots appearing on her avatar's body. After examining the others, she discovered the same symptoms. All the avatars were infected. She immediately began studying the illness. The first tests revealed nothing. Humanity simply didn't have the medical knowledge to treat an avatar's biology. No antiviral drug, no allergy treatment, no vaccine worked. The Na'vi immune system was built differently. They couldn't catch viruses or flu. Only toxins could harm them. Something at the base had poisoned them. The entire science team began inspecting the area around the settlement. And that's when they found it. A small stream where every plant along its banks had withered and died. The source was a leaking dump truck engine, dripping biofuel straight into the water. After analyzing the sample in her lab, Grace discovered that the substance did more than just poison the water. It absorbed essential nutrients from the environment. Because of that, Pandora's ecosystem couldn't neutralize it naturally. She concluded that the children became sick because their bodies were weaker and couldn't handle such a massive loss of nutrients. The avatars, being biologically similar in age and structure to Na'vi children, suffered the same way. The entire avatar program was on the brink of shutdown until help arrived from an unexpected source. Moat came to Hell's Gate, bringing news from the Taukami clan. They had discovered a cure, a native plant called Shekaline, capable of fully healing the illness. She brought the plant with her, and together they created a vaccine. It worked. The avatars recovered completely. A strong friendship grew between Moat and Grace. The first genuine alliance between Na'vi and humans, born not out of trade or science, but out of compassion. For the first time, the Na'vi helped the Sky people without asking for anything in return. The Omaticaya clan didn't all share Moat's faith in humanity, but the very next day, all 8 children stood at the door of Grace's school, ready to continue their lessons. The year is 2143, and tensions on Earth have reached a breaking point. Natural resources are nearly depleted, sparking global conflicts between nations. The world has split into 2 sides: those who believe Earth's ecosystem can still be saved, and those who insist it's already too late. With the near-total collapse of wildlife on both land and in the oceans, the RDA Security Force was established. Its official mission was to mediate disputes between countries. In reality, it became the spark for a massive intercontinental war. By 2145, one of the key figures in the Avatar story, Jake Sully, was serving as a Marine. During combat operations in Venezuela, he suffered a severe spinal injury that left him paralyzed from the waist down. The war raged on for another 3 years. Over 200 million people were killed, and more than 500 million became refugees. Countless veterans, trained soldiers hardened by battle, were left without purpose. For many of them, the RDA became that purpose. The corporation eagerly recruited anyone with combat experience. By then, it was clear Earth could no longer be saved. The focus had to shift to the stars, to colonization and expansion. And so, the crews of new interstellar missions to Pandora were filled not with scientists, but with soldiers. They were sent there not just to study, but to prepare for conquest. In 2014-6, the first officially documented murder of a Na'vi by humans took place. On the western side of Pandora, at one of the TAP research centers, the children of the Sorrento clan, who had been raised there since their abduction, began to question their origins. They refused to believe that their parents had abandoned them. Ahari, the oldest of the group, still remembered the night they were taken from their home and brought to the human base. She no longer believed a single word from John Mercer, the head of the TAP program, and demanded the truth, real answers. Instead of being heard, she was punished. A full day without food. That night, the children attempted to escape the facility, but the RDA security team caught them before they made it past the perimeter. Ahari refused to surrender. She wanted to see Pandora with her own eyes, not through glass, not through lessons, but as a free Na'vi. Mercer, enraged by her defiance, finally snapped. Right in front of the other children, he killed Ahari. The official report stated that the girl had attacked a guard, forcing him to act in self-defense. The truth, of course, was buried. The remaining Sorrento children, terrified and broken, obeyed every command from that day on. And so, despite the murder of one of its students, the TAP program continued as if nothing had happened. In 2014-8, the RDA finally received official authorization to use military force against the native population. Before that, engaging the Na'vi in direct conflict had been strictly forbidden. But as the situation on Earth grew desperate, the corporation was granted full control, free to act however it saw fit on Pandora. That's when the bulldozers began their advance into new territories. Mining operations expanded even into sacred lands. Hunting grounds were destroyed. Vast stretches of forest vanished. At last, humanity revealed its true nature. The Na'vi endured the desecration of their world as long as they could, but their patience had limits. By 2152, Grace's students had grown older and angrier. One day, they attacked a bulldozer and set it on fire. Their goal wasn't revenge. They were trying to protect a great tree that was home to the stingbats. RDA security responded immediately with bullets. Most of the children managed to escape, all except Silwanin, Neytiri's sister. She was shot dead in the doorway of the school, right in front of Neytiri's eyes.
What happened here?
The Omatikaya learned as much about us as they needed to.
After that tragedy, the Sky People became enemies to the Omatikaya clan. Even Grace Augustine was no longer allowed anywhere near their home. The original purpose of the Avatar program had been to build peaceful relationships with Pandora's native inhabitants. But after the massacre at the school, all of Grace's years of work were wiped away. She knew she would never regain the Na'vi's trust, so she devoted herself entirely to her true passion, studying Pandora's flora and fauna. What seemed impossible on Earth was, on Pandora, the foundation of the entire ecosystem. Grace discovered that every living organism on the moon was connected through a vast neural network. Deep underground, the roots of plants formed a single planet-wide web through which they could communicate and even store memories. It was in essence a giant biocomputer, one the Na'vi called Eywa, or the Great Mother. This system resembled the human nervous system, but on a planetary scale. Eywa was a higher form of intelligence, one far beyond human comprehension or imagination. For the Na'vi, Eywa wasn't just nature. She was the collective consciousness of Pandora, the living soul of their world, and their most sacred deity. Fascinated by this discovery, Grace Augustine reached out to a young scientist named Tom Sully, a strong advocate of the theory that all life on Earth was once connected by a shared mental and biological network. Tom believed that human interference had destroyed this natural connection, and that this was the true reason behind the extinction of 90% of all animal species. But despite that grim reality, Tom made a scientific breakthrough. He successfully revived a Bengal tiger, a species that had been extinct for over a century. His theories and accomplishments deeply impressed Grace. She invited him to join her on Pandora to help study Eywa and explore the possibility that the planet's biological network might be the key to understanding how life itself stays in balance. At that same time, the RDA was preparing for another major expedition to Pandora, and Tom was officially added to the list of scientists chosen to work with the Avatar program, but tragedy struck before he could even begin his journey. On his way home one evening, Tom Sully was attacked by muggers and killed for just a few dollars in his wallet. Creating an Avatar embryo was an incredibly expensive process, but fortunately, Tom Sully had a twin brother, Jake. Because their genomes were identical, Jake was genetically compatible with Tom's avatar, so the RDA made him an offer to take his late brother's place in the Avatar program.
Your brother represented a significant investment. I'd like to talk to you about taking over his contract.
And since your genome is identical to his, you could step into his shoes, so to speak.
A former Marine, now a disabled man with nothing to lose, agrees. In 2154, an interstellar transport ship carrying new supplies and personnel reached the orbit of the gas giant Polyphemus. Since childhood, Jake Sully had heard about the moon Pandora, but he never imagined he would one day live there. Hell's Gate wasn't the only human outpost on Pandora, but it was the main stronghold of humanity on this distant world. Jake felt excitement upon arrival, but Dr. Grace Augustine didn't share his enthusiasm. She was unhappy that a former Marine had been added to her science team. Tom Sully, Jake's twin brother, had died, and now only Jake could link to his avatar. However, he had never studied Pandora, didn't know the Na'vi language, and wasn't trained for the mission. Still, the Avatar was his only chance to start a new life. After his injury, he had long forgotten what it meant to feel whole again. His legs no longer worked, but in the body of an Avatar, everything was different. During his first test link, Jake felt incredible joy. For the first time in years, he could run again. To everyone's surprise, he quickly adapted to his new body, which caught the attention not only of Grace, but also of Colonel Miles Quaritch, head of RDA security on Pandora. Quaritch needed someone inside the Avatar program, someone who could study the Na'vi from within and find a way to control them. He offered Jake a deal, complete the mission, and he would get the best treatment back on Earth, a surgery that would restore his legs.
Can you do that for me, son? Hell yeah, sir. Well, all right then.
On his second mission, Jake Sully was assigned as part of the security team. Science wasn't exactly his field, but when it came to handling a rifle, he knew what he was doing. While Grace Augustine and Norm Spellman focused on their research, studying Pandora's rich ecosystems, Jake's attention was caught by something unusual. Strange, spiral-shaped plants known as helicaradians. The moment he reached out to touch one, it reacted instantly, the entire structure collapsing and coiling into a tight spiral, as if retreating from danger. On Pandora, you can never let your guard down. Every creature here, every sound, every shadow could mean death. But Jake was too distracted, too curious. He wandered away from the group without realizing it, unaware that something massive was already stalking him. It was Thanator, the most fearsome land predator on Pandora, a towering beast of muscle and armor, its head shielded by thick chitinous plates, its back lined with an armored ridge that made it nearly invulnerable to human weapons. And Jake Sully had just stepped into its hunting ground. A meeting with a Thanator meant certain death, so the only option was to run. Trying to escape, Jake strayed even farther from the group, and after jumping from a waterfall, became completely lost. With no knowledge of the terrain and no survival skills, his chances were close to zero. But he wasn't alone. He was being watched by Neytiri, daughter of the Omaticaya clan leader. She had once been a student of Grace and still remembered the day humans killed her sister, Silwanin, before her eyes. Jake was just one step away from death. Neytiri had already drawn her bow, ready to end his life. But at that moment, a seed from the sacred tree of souls gently landed on the tip of her arrow, as if Eywa herself had sent a sign. To the Na'vi, these seeds are pure spirits, manifestations of their goddess's will. They believe the sacred tree holds the souls of their ancestors. If Eywa had chosen, it meant Jake must live. Neytiri kept watching the outsider, but as night fell, the forest of Pandora came alive, and its predators began to hunt. A pack of viper wolves picked up Jake's scent. They weren't as large as the Thanator, but their strength lay not in size, it was in their numbers. Alone, Jake had no chance of survival. Realizing this, Neytiri decided to intervene. She struck with lightning speed, killing the predators and saving Jake's life. Seeing how helpless he was in this world, Sully began following his mysterious savior, hoping she could help him. But Neytiri herself didn't understand why she chose to protect the outsider. Her heart couldn't allow the death of an avatar, yet she couldn't bring Jake with her either. The Sky People were forbidden from entering Omaticaya lands. And then something inexplicable happened. Around Jake, the seeds of the Tree of Souls began to swirl. They responded to the avatar's presence, slowly descending onto his body, as if sending a sign. Neytiri was stunned. She had seen this only once before, when the Tree of Souls chose her mother, Moat, as Tsahik, the clan's spiritual leader. But for the tree to choose an outsider, that seemed impossible. Confused but certain it meant something, Neytiri made the only decision that felt right at that moment: to show the avatar to her spiritual mother, Moat. Since Silwanin's death, no sky person had ever approached Hometree, the sacred dwelling of the Omaticaya clan, but this time was different. The Na'vi reacted with hostility to the appearance of the outsider, yet they could not ignore the sign sent by Eywa herself. Jake was brought before Etukan, the clan's leader, and Moat, the Tsahik, who, as it turned out, were Neytiri's parents. The spiritual leaders faced a difficult choice: to kill the outsider, or give him a chance to learn to see the world as the Na'vi see it. For the Omaticaya, this was also an opportunity to study the Sky People. So a decision was made. Neytiri would become Jake's teacher. She was to show him the clan's customs and traditions, teach him to feel Eywa, and understand the connection that bound all life on Pandora. Neytiri didn't entirely like the idea, but part of her was curious to see what the outsider was truly capable of.
My daughter will teach you our ways. Learn well, Jake Sully. Then we will see if your insanity can be cured.
When Jake Sully woke up in the science lab, he was greeted as a hero. For the first time, a Na'vi clan had accepted a human among them. Grace Augustine had spent years trying to achieve that, and yet it was the newcomer, the one who didn't even know what to expect, who managed to earn the Omaticaya's trust. Word of Jake's success spread quickly, and it soon reached Parker Selfridge, the RDA's chief administrator on Pandora. Together with Colonel Miles Quaritch, Parker gave Jake a new assignment. The problem was simple, but dangerous. The Hometree of the Omaticaya clan stood directly above one of the largest deposits of unobtainium on the moon. The corporation needed the Na'vi to move, peacefully if possible, by force if necessary. If diplomacy failed, the RDA was fully prepared to use military action, but they wanted to avoid a public relations disaster. At least for now, Jake was given 3 months to earn the Na'vi's complete trust and persuade them to relocate voluntarily. Not everyone supported this plan, especially the scientists. Grace Augustine was furious about the military's interference in the Avatar program. What angered her even more was realizing that one of her own team members was secretly working for RDA Command. In protest, Grace Augustine decided to leave Hell's Gate behind. She relocated her research to the Hallelujah Mountains, where the first independent science station was established. The place was a true natural wonder, massive cliffs and boulders floating in midair. It all happened thanks to the unique properties of unobtainium, which could either attract or repel objects, generating powerful magnetic fields that defied gravity. Jake Sully, meanwhile, was thrilled by the chance to return to Pandora's wild beauty. The old research module had everything the Avatar program needed to operate. And the first thing Jake wanted was to get back into his Avatar body. Life among the Omaticaya began early each morning, And on that day, Jake was in for a remarkable experience. His mentor, Neytiri, began teaching him how their world truly worked, how every living thing was connected, and how the Na'vi only took from nature what they needed to survive. Her task was to share knowledge, to show him their customs and traditions, and to introduce him to the incredible diversity of Pandora's flora and fauna. Most creatures on the moon were hexapods, six-legged animals. Because of Pandora's dense atmosphere and lower gravity, this form of locomotion was the most energy-efficient way to move. The Na'vi hunt often, and during the hunt, they use dire horses or mountain banshees. The first thing every hunter must learn is how to control their bond through the tsahelu, the sacred neural connection. At the tip of the neural queue extending from the back of their head are specialized nerve tendrils. These same biological structures exist in most of Pandora's plants and animals, allowing them to form a deep, shared neural link with the world around them. Jake's first challenge was to tame a dire horse and connect with it through tsahelu. He had to open his mind, to let another being enter his consciousness, and create a lasting bond between rider and mount. It was a difficult process, especially for a human who had never experienced anything like it before. Day after day, Jake Sully followed the path of a young Omaticaya warrior. Among the Na'vi, survival depends not on sight or sound, but on instinct, on sensing the flow of energy that moves through every living thing. The third segment of the Na'vi brain was designed for exactly that, to perceive and connect with the living essence of the world around them. To become a full member of the Omaticaya clan, the outsider must complete his first hunt. Every year on Pandora, the great storm-based migration takes place. These massive herbivores are the clan's main source of meat, hide and bone, materials used for tools, weapons, and everyday life. However, before joining the hunt, a warrior must first tame his own banshee, known to the Na'vi as an ikran. Unlike the dire horse, the bond with an ikran is made once in a lifetime, a connection that lasts until death. Their nesting grounds lie high in the floating Hallelujah Mountains, and simply reaching them is a challenge in itself. The Na'vi believe that a warrior's spiritual cleansing begins on the ground. The journey to the nesting site purifies both body and mind, freeing the heart of fear and doubt. Only then can one hope to bond with such a wild and powerful creature. The Ikran are fierce, untamed predators, proud and defiant. To forge a bond with one, a hunter must first tame it, or at least earn its respect. But even after tsahelu is made, a hunter must complete the first flight. That moment seals the bond, a connection that will last for life. As Jake's mentor, Neytiri taught him how to control his banshee in flight, how to maneuver, how to feel the creature's rhythm, how to breathe with it as one. Surprisingly, the outsider succeeded. In just 3 months, Jake Sully walked the full path of a Na'vi hunter. But on Pandora, there is one unchanging rule: always stay alert. The Ikran may be fast and agile, but there is one creature that rules the skies, the mighty Toruk, the great Leonopteryx. These predators are solitary hunters, feared by all other flying creatures, banshees, stingbats, and anything else that dares to enter their territory. The only way to escape a Toruk's pursuit is to dive into the dense jungle canopy, where the web of branches and vines is too thick for the massive creature to maneuver. And this time, it was exactly those tangled trees that saved Jake and Neytiri from certain death. Arriving at Hometree, near the massive skeleton of a Leonopteryx, Neytiri explained to Sully that the Toruk was a sacred creature, not only for their clan, but for all Na'vi. Throughout the entire history of their people, there had been only 5 cases where hunters managed to tame a Leonopteryx. Such a warrior is called Toruk Makto, and it requires the direct will of the great goddess. A Toruk Makto always appears in times of sorrow. All clans must bow before the strength of such a leader and follow him, even if it means marching towards certain death. That is the sacred duty of every Na'vi.
My grandfather's grandfather was Toruk Makto, writer of Last Shadow.
You wrote this?
3 long months passed in the blink of an eye. Jake Sully had completed the full path of a young hunter. He earned the trust not only of Neytiri, but of the entire Na'vi clan. Now he was one of them, one of the Omaticaya. He was allowed to visit all of their sacred places, even the Tree of Voices, The Na'vi have no written language, no books, and no historical records. They know their history through songs, stories passed down from generation to generation. The voices of their ancestors can be heard by linking with the song tree. Within Eywa lies the memory of the entire Na'vi people. Neytiri explained to Jake that as one of the Omaticaya, he must now craft his own bow from a branch of Hometree and choose his mate. Of course, Jake had already made his choice long ago. All that remained was her consent. Neytiri had watched him change, learn, and become part of their world. And she didn't even notice when she fell in love with the outsider. With Neytiri by his side, Jake completely forgot about the promise he had made to Colonel Quaritch and Parker Selfridge. The time for diplomacy had come to an end. RDA wanted results. First and foremost, the RDA needed to drive the Omaticaya clan from their land and clear the area for unobtainium mining. The humans' first move was a blatant provocation. Enormous bulldozers leveled the surrounding forest, including the sacred Tree of Voices. The Avatar program was suspended since Jake Sully had failed his diplomatic mission. Worse still, he had taken the Na'vi's side. The entire science team was recalled to Hell's Gate. Parker Selfridge had no interest in Na'vi traditions or spirituality. For him, only results mattered. After years of RDA presence on Pandora, the nearest unobtainium deposits had been completely depleted. The only way to maintain profitability was to expand into new territories, even if those lands were home to the natives. But Colonel Quaritch didn't share Selfridge's half-hearted pacifism. He had recently become a father. His partner, a young pilot assistant named Paz Socorro, had given birth to a son. They named the boy Miles. He was the first human child born on Pandora. Quaritch was a father now, and he understood that Earth had no future left. He tried to convince Parker Selfridge to take action, but the company's leadership feared a public scandal. It would be best, they decided, to make it look as though the Na'vi struck first, forcing the humans to defend themselves. And the plan worked. One night, Omaticaya hunters destroyed several bulldozers and killed 6 humans. In response, the main diplomatic mission was placed under military control. Colonel Quaritch got what he wanted and immediately gave the order to prepare for an assault on Hometree. Jake could do nothing. He no longer had access to his avatar. His only hope was to convince Parker to give them one last chance. Selfridge hesitated but agreed to grant Jake and Grace 1 hour. In that time, they had to persuade the Omaticaya to leave their land. When they finally managed to reach the clan gathering, Jake tried to explain that the Sky People would destroy everything around them, but their trust in him was gone. Even Neytiri no longer believed in Sully. There was no time left for arguments. The distant roar of aircraft was already echoing in the sky. Taking up his position, Colonel Quaritch gave the order to begin the bombardment. First came the gas shells, meant to drive the Na'vi out of their home and reduce civilian casualties. Humanity above all. Then followed incendiary bombs, hundreds of them. The Omaticaya tried to fight back, but their bows and arrows couldn't pierce the thick armor of human machines. The battle was hopeless. Hometree had stood for thousands of years. For centuries, the Omaticaya clan had called it their home. Generations were born and died beneath its branches. But with the arrival of humans, everything changed. The clan could not withstand the onslaught, and before the eyes of their people, their sacred tree gave way. It collapsed, burying beneath its ruins the history and the future of the Omaticaya. Of course, there were casualties. Dozens of Na'vi were killed, among them Etu Khan, the clan's leader, and Neytiri's father. His death was a terrible blow to the entire people, but most of all to Neytiri, who lost not only her father, but also her trust in Jake. Selfridge achieved his goal. The Na'vi left their land, and the Avatar program was temporarily shut down. Norm, Jake, and Grace were taken into custody, accused of treason and disobedience to the company. But not everyone agreed with the leadership. Pilot Trudy Chacon refused to follow Quaritch and Selfridge, and she also had romantic ties with Norm. Together with technician Max Patel, she organized a rescue operation, freeing the prisoners and preparing an unauthorized takeoff in her Samson. At the last moment, their escape was noticed by Colonel Quaritch. Everything depended on whether they could leave the base before being shot down. It had all happened so fast that the soldiers didn't have time to react. Under the colonel's gunfire, they managed to escape. But one bullet found its target. Grace Augustine was hit. Her condition was stable for the moment, but without medical supplies or access to a med lab, a stomach wound was fatal. Jake realized that only Moat could save Grace now, but the Omaticaya would never again help outsiders, especially him and Grace. There was only one option left: to tame the mighty Toruk. If he could do that, all the Na'vi would be bound by tradition to follow him, swearing loyalty to the great warrior. Jake had a theory. If the Leonopteryx feared nothing in the sky and always flew higher than any other creature, then whatever happened above it would go unnoticed. That blind zone could be his only advantage, and his plan worked. During the time of the Omatikaya's greatest sorrow, the clan gathered in the song circle near the Tree of Souls. Their song rose to the heavens, calling upon the Great Mother. They prayed for Eywa to hear them, and she did. When Jake rode in on his massive Leonopteryx, the Omaticaya could hardly believe their eyes. This was a sign from Eywa. The outsider had tamed the Toruk. The Na'vi could not ignore such a message. The entire clan recognized Jake as a great warrior and leader, Toruk Makto. Now the most important task was to unite all the clans and stand together against the humans. So Jake flew on his beast to ask for support from the leaders of nearby clans: Tairangi, Tekunan, Alangi, Tron, and everyone living around the Omaticaya. 15 clans answered their leader's call. Meanwhile, Moat tried to save Grace. Through a link with Eywa and the right song, healing was possible, but it required time. Unfortunately, Grace didn't have enough of it, and she was dying. Colonel Quaritch did not sit idle. Satellite imagery showed the Na'vi rallying. More than 2,000 were gathering, and with such a force, humanity faced possible annihilation. Quaritch concluded there was only one chance to win: to strike first. War was now inevitable. The next morning, a massive fleet of aircraft headed toward the Hallelujah Mountains. But Jake Sully was ready for Colonel Quaritch's move. After all, he was a Marine too, and he had prepared an ambush in advance. When the human air units reached the floating mountains, the Na'vi struck first. The Samson gunships were agile, but they couldn't compete with the Banshees, who ruled these skies and knew every current of the air. At first, the battle unfolded exactly as Jake had planned, but the humans' weaponry was far too powerful and well-armored. And to make things worse, many of the Na'vi clans had never fought a war or taken part in coordinated hunts before. Their movements were disorganized, each hunter acting on instinct, fighting alone, and such a tactic could only lead to one outcome: defeat. But just when hope was about to die, the Great Mother herself, Eywa, answered the call for help. On the horizon, flocks of mountain banshees appeared in the sky, diving like a swarm of hungry piranhas and tearing the human squadron apart. On the ground, Pandora's own army rose to meet the invaders. Hammerhead Titanotheres charged into the fray, and even the mighty Thanator bowed its head before the Na'vi. All of Pandora's fauna chose to defend their home from the uninvited guests. Humanity seemed doomed. The only man who had not yet given up was Colonel Quaritch. Aboard his carrier, the Valkyrie, he still had incendiary bombs. If he could complete the bombardment, he would burn every living thing on the surface of Pandora. Jake had to stop the Mad Colonel. He made one decisive choice. The bomber was protected by double armor, but it had one vulnerable point: its engines. Jake planned a daring trick: land on the ship's fuselage, then destroy the engines with hand grenades. He pulled it off. The bomber was destroyed. But just before the crash, Quaritch managed to climb into his AMP suit, a heavily armored exoskeleton designed for combat. It was strong enough to survive a fall from great heights and fully equipped for survival in Pandora's atmosphere. But on the ground, Colonel Quaritch was not alone. Jake Sully was already waiting for him, ready for the final confrontation, ready to stop the madman once and for all.
It's all over.
Nothing's over while I'm breathing.
I kinda hoped you'd say that.
The battle was inevitable. During the fight, Jake managed to crack the glass of Quaritch's AMP suit. But Quaritch wasn't an ordinary soldier. He had years of training, battlefield experience, and the ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. It had saved his life more than once. At the last moment, he realized he didn't need to fight the Avatar at all. All he had to do was damage the link module, the place where Jake's human body was lying. With that, Jake's connection to his Avatar began to fade. His body grew weaker, his movements slower, giving Quaritch the perfect chance to strike. But once again, when Jake needed help most, Neytiri was there. With 2 precise arrows from her bow, she ended the war, and Quaritch's life. Many Na'vi had fallen in the battle. Death also claimed the young and newly appointed clan leader Tsute. Yet despite the loss of his spiritual brother, the great Toruk Makto, Jake Sully, showed mercy. Jake allowed all the humans to leave Hell's Gate peacefully. Only the scientists and a few workers remained. Those who wanted to study Pandora, not destroy it. As for Jake Sully, he was now truly one of the Omaticaya, their leader, and a leader could not live as an avatar. The transfer of souls was possible, but only if Moat had enough time, and if Eywa herself chose to help. Jake's human consciousness was permanently transferred into his avatar body. He was now Na'vi in truth, and for a moment it seemed as if all the troubles were finally behind them. This is part 1 of the complete chronology of the Avatar universe. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and write in the comments what new things you learned about the world of Pandora. Part 2 coming soon.